Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Swordman Josh Gaming. I had promised everybody the deck tech for the deck that I ran at my Modern Horizons pre-release, and here I am tonight to present it to you. I have it laid out here in front of me. As per normal, the way I'll do this, I'll go over the 1 drops, the 2 drops, the 3 drops, the 4 drops, and the 5 drops, what I ran for removal, how I placed, and of course the land that I covered. So I ended up running what I would consider a Orzhov mid-range deck. I placed around 16th out of 30 at my local gaming store. I got paired up to a lot of fast green decks, and playing mid-range, a lot of times if I could stabilize, I could win. If I couldn't stabilize, I would lose. Basically, every single one of my games except for one went to 3 rounds, and I either went 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. Overall, I placed lower because of the 3 rounds, of course, for everything, but also because I was running a mid-range deck in what was a much faster format. So we'll go over our 1 drops first. The creatures that I had in a 1 drop spot. The first one was one of the rares I pulled, which is Giver of Runes. This is a 1/2 core cleric. Basically, she didn't do much for me besides I was hoping that I'd be able to tap, protect one of my creatures from a color, and get through for some damage. But basically, when she came down on the board, she got hated on pretty hard, or she just caused me to be able to try to get a couple more turns to get into the mid game. But for the most part, if she came on the board, I couldn't stabilize fast enough. The other card in my 1 drop slot that's a creature that did a lot of work and won me quite a few games with some combination. I ran a lot of ninjas. It's just what I ended up drafting, and this is mostly what I would consider a black-white ninjas deck. But this is Changeling Outcast. It's 1 black mana for a 1/1. And since it's a changeling, it counts as a ninja, and you'll see how many other things that I have that are changelings or ninjas in this deck. But it can't block and it can't be blocked. So a lot of games, if I drop this on 1, it'd just start pinging in every turn until I could drop a ninja later on. And then our only 1 drop spell is Ephemerate. So this is one that exiles a creature. It basically flickers a creature. So you can protect one of your creatures, but it also has rebound. So you can flicker again on one of your upkeeps. I have quite a few creatures in here that have ETBs, so it allowed me to get double ETB triggers on one of my creatures. The biggest creature that this worked great with was Irregular Cohorts. Into my 2 drops, we'll go into the actual creatures first, because most of my 2 drops are spells. So the first one I had as a 2 drop, I pulled this Foil Gluttonous Slug. So it's a 0/3 with Menace and Evolve. And this just ended up being a really great blocker. And as things kept coming out, he ended up getting bigger and bigger. I had him all the way up to 4 counters on him in one game, which made him a substantial 4/7, which made him a great blocker. And I love the flavor text on it. It's a slug, and it says, "No amount of salt will save you." This is one of the foils that I pulled. The other foil I pulled out of my packs was red. And then, even though this is technically, it's a 4 drop if you hard cast it, this is one of my ninjas. It's a 2 drop if you ninjutsu cast it. And I only hard cast this guy once. He's a 3/3 ninjutsu for 1 and a black. And when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. That second ability never came into play with me playing this guy, so basically it just allowed me to ninjutsu in a 3/3 body on turn 2, which could do a lot of damage. In terms of our spells that we have in our 2 drops, we have quite a few of those, and we have 1 artifact. The one artifact we're running is Amorphous Axe. 2 mana to play it, 3 mana to equip it. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and is every creature type. This is one of those equipment that I wish I could have got onto my Changeling Outcast. However, through all 5 rounds and through all, it would have been 5 times 3 is 15 minus 1, 14 games. Out of 14 games, I never drew this card, which is just, the odds of that is astronomically low. But that's what it was in there for. The next 2-drop spell we're running is Return from Extinction. This got played quite a bit of work. The first part of it is return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. However, the second part is to return 2 creature cards of the same creature type from your graveyard to your hand. And like I said, you'll see a bunch of Ninja and Changeling synergies. And so basically, whenever I cast this spell, I was always getting 2 creatures back from the graveyard to my hand, which was wonderful. Our next is one of our card draws. It's Ransack the Lab. You get a look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. I have 1 Graveyard Recursion card, and that's really it. So I had to be careful what I put in the graveyard, but when we got into the mid-game, this mostly allowed me to dump land into the graveyard. I have this. This was both a removal and sometimes a win con, but it's Umezawa's Charm. Its target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, or you gain 2 life. This won me multiple games playing a Ninja of the New Moon and then playing this on top of it and getting in for 8 damage in 1 swing. So great little card there. It also saved me 1 game because I took one of the guy that has Vanishing 3 and makes squirrels. I'm not good with green cards because I don't like to play green. I eliminated that guy off the board, so all the squirrels immediately got smaller. Shelter. This was a great card. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, and then it replaces itself. This card allowed me multiple times to get Prohibition, the white card that makes it so that way your card's nothing. Can't attack, can't do anything. Allowed me to get it off of my ninjas and some of my other cards. Allowed me to get rid of multiple things that people kept trying to place on my creatures. And one time it allowed me to get through for the final killing blow by giving myself protection from green, I believe it was. Like I said, I played a lot of green. And last but not least is another piece of spot, well, I don't want to call this spot removal because it's just target player sacrifices a creature. It's Diabolic Edict. I remember when this card originally came out. Great in early game. Not so great in sealed and later game if you haven't controlled the board or done a lot of trades. Because at that point, typically they have a token or something like that where they can just sacrifice it and they don't care about it. So that was our 2-drop slot. In our 3-drop slot, we have another set of creature suite. So our first one is Venomous Changeling. This one stopped a lot of decks from attacking in for quite a while. It is a 1/3 Changeling, so it's also a ninja with Death Touch. But the Death Touch was the key word there to stop people from coming in with their big beaters. We have Vesperlark, which is white and 2 colorless with a 2/1 flying. So it's one of my, except for that Changeling Outcast, this is one of my few evasion pieces. I have this, and I believe I have one other flyer, and that's it. But it has a leaves the battlefield effect that you get to return a creature card with power 1 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. So it allowed me to get back my Changeling Outcast or my Venomous Changeling or my Giver of Runes. I think that's about it in terms of what it can get back. This card, Throat Seeker. This swung the tides of many a battles for me. 1 black, 2 colorless for a 3/2. It's a ninja. Surprise, surprise. And unblocked attacking ninjas you control have lifelink. So like I said, I have a Ninja of the New Moon here that I'll show you. I actually have it in the 4-drop slot, even though if you hard cast it, it's a 5. I never hard cast Ninja of the New Moon, but multiple times Ninja of the New Moon would get in with the Changeling Outcasts and get in for 7 damage, and I'll show you how that 7th point of damage happened, or sometimes 8 damage with the Umezawa's Charm, and I would gain that much life, which would be the turning tide of a lot of the battles. So Throat Seeker changed a lot of the battles. And then our last card in the 3-drop was Martyr's Soul. And this one was interesting. I hard cast this once, but each time other than that, I convoked it out. So it's a 3/2 for 3, which isn't the best in the world. However, if you can convoke this out completely and leave all your lands untapped, then it enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So it becomes a 5/4 for 3, which is pretty good. But to be able to cast that, most of the time this was dropping on turn 4 or turn 5, drawing it. Like I said, I hard casted this a couple of times, and when I did, it was on a turn 3 hard cast to fill out my curve. The rest of our 3-drops are spells, so we have 2 removals and 1 very helpful spell. I talked about how Ninja of the New Moon multiple times would go in for 7 points of damage. Well, this is the card that did it. A very sneaky card, and most of the time, except for one game, if I got this on the battlefield, I won the game. And that's Etchings of the Chosen. So when it comes into the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Of course, I choose ninjas because almost every single thing in my deck, except for, 1, 2, 3... except for 5 of my creatures are ninjas or changelings, so they're all ninjas. So creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1, but then you can sack a creature of the chosen type, and target creature you control gains indestructible until the end of turn. So it protects your creatures as well. Only use that second part of it to give one of my creatures indestructible until end of turn once. But other than that, that +1/+1 did a lot of work. I did pull a copy of Generous Gift for one of my removal pieces. 1 white, 2 colorless, destroy target permanent, any permanent on the board, doesn't matter what, but in a sealed environment, it's almost always going to be a creature. And its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant token. I had a lot of trouble dealing with tramplers. I mentioned that in my box opening. And a lot of times this card would have to deal with getting rid of trampling creatures, which not the best way you want to use a removal like this. You'd rather use it on some kind of big bomb, but for me, the bombs coming at me were trampling creatures. And last but not least is Wing Shards for a white, and a colorless. And target player sacrifices an attacking creature. However, the lovely thing about this is that keyword right there, Storm. So the very seasoned players would know better than to cast spells during their first main, unless if they were casting it to try to beef up one of their creatures. And then they would cast all their spells during their second main. However, a lot of the younger players, I played a couple of what I would call younger players and not quite as seasoned veterans. They would play spells during their first main, and then they would go in for an attack, and in which case Wing Shards would wipe out their attacking forces. Great little card, loved it. So now we're going to go into our 4-drops, and our 4-drops is all creatures. So the first one I've mentioned multiple times, it's Ninja of the New Moon. This is a 6/3 with a ninjutsu for a black and 3 colorless. It played well with Changeling Outcast on multiple occasions. I just wish there was some way that I could have brought this back to my hand, so that way I could have played it multiple times. But it won many games. My next is my Graveyard Recursion, which is Grave Shifter. This is also a changeling, so it's a ninja. And when it enters the battlefield, you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This is one of the targets that would be used for the rebound for the Ephemerate, so that way you could flicker Grave Shifter and get yet another creature from your graveyard back to your hand. Next is Rock's Veteran. So this is a 2/4. It's one of the few cards that is not a ninja, but it has Battle Cry. So whenever this creature attacks, all other attacking creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn, except for it. So it's always a 2/4. However, also when it attacks, you tap a target creature an opponent controls. So it allows you to get through with your creatures easier and buffs them all up. Enough said about that. Irregular Cohorts. This is also a 2/2 changeling, and it comes with a 2/2 colorless shapeshifter changeling brother. So it comes with two 2/2 ninjas. With Etchings of the Chosen out, it created two 3/3 ninjas, and then with an Ephemerate trigger, you could get even more ninjas off of it. So this card was one of my main places that I would target that Ephemerate as well, and then rebound it. And last but not least is Rank Officer. 1 black, 3 colorless. It's a 3/1, so it can trade out there with anything with 3 defense. You wouldn't want to trade down with it, but the thing that it also does is when it enters the battlefield, you can discard a card. Most of the time, you're going to discard a land in the sealed environment, and if you do, you get another 2/2 black zombie creature token. So for 4 mana, you get 5 power on the board. It does have another ability, which I never really got to play because we didn't get into an end game because this format was so fast. It was a lot faster than what I thought it was going to be. For a black and a colorless, you can tap it and exile a creature card from your graveyard, and each opponent loses 2 life. Never got to use that ability. It would have been nice if it was actually a life point swing instead of, for this weak of a body on the tail end, on the butt, it would have been nice if it was opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. But it is what it is. And then last but not least, our 5-drops. So our first 5-drop is our creature. It is the Silumgar Scavenger. It's a zombie bird with flying and exploit. It's just a 2/3. However, when it enters the battlefield, you can sack a creature, and if you do, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this, and it gains haste. And then also, whenever one of your creatures die, it gets another +1/+1 counter for each one of your creatures. Excuse me. So this actually won me one game, brought it into play, hasted it, attacked in with this and the Vesper Lark because they only had 1 spider left to block. They were at 2 life and managed to win that game. So I ended up losing the round with that person, but I won a game out of it. And our last 5-drop is another removal spell, which is Settle Beyond Reality. So you exile a target creature you don't control. So you exile an opponent's creature. Again, a lot of times this had to go after a Trampler for me. And then exile a creature you control, and then it returns to the battlefield. So it's another flicker effect. So again, you're going after the irregular Core Hearts or the Grave Shifter mostly to be able to get some extra value out of it. So to make this whole thing run, I did use one other of my rare cards that I pulled, and that was Silent Clearing. Nice canopy land. Was great to be able to drop this on turn 1 or turn 2 to get the alternate mana I didn't have, and then as we got into turns 4 or 5, it was great to be able to tap it, sack it, and be able to draw a card. I'm not running anything that requires snow, but for giggles, because I pulled them, I did run 1 snow-covered swamp, 1 snow-covered plains. Then on top of it, I ran 7 swamps and 7 plains. This is the deck that I piloted to a 16th place position at my LGS. A lot of the people above me had some really good pulls and some really good deck building, but it was a great weekend overall. It was a great play day overall. I only got irritated really at my last game because it was so quick. I never even got a chance to play really. It was a green deck, a green stompy deck basically, where he pulled a bunch of bear synergy out of 6 sealed packs. So lucky for him. But anyways, wanted to present my deck tech, and I hope everybody else had a great pre-release weekend. Go ahead and post down below. I'm curious what your win-loss records were and where you placed and how many people were at your pre-release and what you ran in terms of your deck. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great rest of the work week, and as always, may Keep Calm Kitty be with you. Good night, everybody.